resigned, Georgia. I was gone.
Yeah, well, that's not my fault.
Well, I'm just saying.
So therefore, it is your fault then.
That's right.
Always is.
Always.
Always.
Well,
Should we kick this thing off?
I think so. And I want to start off with a couple things that I wanted to apologize for the last one.
Did you yell?
No, but I kept saying Doreen instead of Noreen. And because when I listened, I'm like, oh my God, I said her name wrong like 12 times right at the beginning. Sorry.
Mike never remembers names anyways, so.
No,
I kept saying Doreen, and I think it's because Doreen just flows off the tongue instead of Noreen. And so, anyway, so I apologize for pronouncing Johnny Gosh's mom's name wrong. Her name was Noreen, not Doreen. Anyway.
Well, at least you kind of knew what you wanted to say. A lot of times I look at people and I'm like, know this person. We got married a while back.
Oh, jeez. the Alzheimer's is kicking in.
Remember?
It's pretty bad. But so we're going to go over Franklin cover-up, Franklin scandal. It's called a lot of things.
Yeah. I kind of, unless you want to start, but I have a couple things that just to kind of transition to as kind of a little bit of a recap from last time.
Well, I think that for people listening, I know a lot of times these are referred to as, as a conspiracy or as, like this is like a pedo ring, but this is kind of like a pedo web.
Oh, very much a web.
Because it goes everywhere. Mm-hmm. And everything we're going to talk about, only a couple people have been convicted of anything dealing with child sexual assault. So the information that we have is coming from, there's a couple of books. There's the Franklin Scandal by Nick Bryant, and then there's a Franklin Cover-Up by John DeCamp. And John DeCamp is a former senator in the state of Nebraska. And Nick Bryant, he's just a writer, isn't he?
He's an investigative journalist.
Yes. So
an author.
Anyways, and we've gotten information online. I've looked at some of the investigative reports that Gary Caradori, who was an investigator in the case, had put together. Various podcasts. I mean, anything that we could dig up. I mean, we've gotten as much as we can without trying to get our hands on an actual report from one of the agencies. But
and like I said, we were talking. A lot of that stuff is covered in the two books, and so I always said, if they're the ones who got the information and it's there, let's just use it rather than having to.
Yeah. So just real quick, the book by, I think I already mentioned, the Franklin Scandal by Nick Bryant. That's probably the more comprehensive book because it covers not only the Franklin Scandal, but then something else that was going on at Washington, D.C. The Franklin Cover-Up by John DeCamp is, I think, for the most part, just over Franklin. There might be some other stuff. I haven't gone through the whole book yet, but I would say Nick Bryant's book is probably more comprehensive.
John DeCamp covers stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. also, and then he also talks about them flying kids to California to the Bohemian Grove. There's a lot in that book.
Yeah. So we're going to try
specifically a lot of the abuse and the satanic rituals that happen, and there's a lot of descriptive stuff in that book. And I have to be honest, when I first read it 5-6 years ago, you have to put it away because it literally will make you physically nauseous. And it did. And it's because it's so dark and it's so horrific that you have to take a break from it. Otherwise, it's just, it physically makes you ill. And I wasn't the only one, because my coworkers and I kind of read this almost as like a little bit of a book club. We were all kind of reading it at the same time, and we're like, okay, we got to take a break because it's getting real bad, and can't hardly sleep at night because of some of the stuff you read in there.
Well, anything that deals with children's pedophile rings and trafficking is pretty gross anyway.
Yeah.
And it seems to be, I shouldn't say more common now, it's more reported on now, just because of some of the events that have occurred over the past few years with both Epstein, P. Diddy.
Maybe even a little bit more believable now.
Probably more believable now. I will admit that when I very first started looking into the Franklin cover-up scandal, whatever you want to call it, I was maybe a little bit skeptical. And I think I always kind of start out that way, which I think is a default good. Because then I feel like if there is truth to it, and then I start to swing the other way, that's probably, I feel better about.
You're coming at it from a police officer point of view.
Yeah, and I think that's
I think I'm the opposite. I
Yeah.
think I am the nurse. Patient tells me they're in pain, I believe them, or something to that effect. I'm kind of the opposite. If they're telling me something's going on, I'm apt to believe them, and then investigate it if it's true or not, or what's going on. Where you're kind of the opposite, I think, a little bit.
Probably.
Yeah.
There might be some things that I believe kind of right off the bat, that one day Nebraska is going to be a good football team again.
Next year's our year.
Yeah.
It's always next year.
Been saying that for 20 some years, but
Well,
anyways,
we can't stop.
where were you thinking to start on this?
I just wanted to recap, but I wrote some notes down, and I thought, okay, here's a good part to go off on part 2. And I want to remind people, if you're just starting here at this episode, maybe go back to the one prior about Johnny Gosch and listen to that one first, because it's going to kind of bridge together, I believe, right? Because I feel like
maybe a little bit. I think a lot of the people we're going to talk about, it's going to have very little to do with last week's, but
not necessarily.
Well, some people believe that there might be a connection between the two.
Including Jamie. I
Yes.
100% agree there's a connection between the two.
I got to be honest, I'm not 100% convinced on that. And I'm not going to tell the listeners what to believe either. That's not why we have our discussions anyway. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything.
No.
We're basically just talking about cases that we've looked into. This being one of them. This being probably the biggest one.
It makes me wonder if you didn't listen to all of the interviews then, if you don't believe they're connected.
I did.
Including Paul Benashi's?
Yes.
Including him, to his testimony about Johnny?
Yeah.
And you still don't believe they're connected?
I probably still struggle with it.
Why is that?
A little bit.
Can you tell me why?
I think for whatever reason.
Maybe I want to say just keep your mind open a little bit instead of being so closed off.
So my mind is open.
But
being open doesn't mean that you have to automatically believe everything that you hear.
Didn't say that.
But I know that's not what you're saying. Well, you kind of did. You said, "Oh, you don't believe it's connected."
Well, but you said you didn't. You said you didn't.
That I don't believe it's connected?
Right.
Well, I didn't say that I 100% don't. It's a little more. That one's a little more difficult for me.
I'm just curious as to why.
I think probably because I'm looking at kind of how this developed, and it seemed like most of everybody involved was maybe because the Franklin itself was in the Omaha area, And so most of those kids were in the Omaha area, and I think, why would they're getting all these kids in the Omaha area and then drive several hours away to get one and then come back, where it's basically like you're at a buffet and you're like, I think I'm going to drive over to McDonald's 24 blocks down the road and grab a cheeseburger.
That's your reasoning?
Well,
You don't think other kids were involved other than Omaha?
well, I don't know. And
I think you're being a little naive in that.
no, I just think that there's a lot more evidence about what we're going to go over with Franklin, the Omaha area, Washington, D.C., than I've seen with the one individual with Iowa. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen.
But what about Eugene Martin?
Eugene Martin.
He was the boy he was the second boy.
Oh, the second boy?
And then the third paper boy.
Okay. From Iowa.
Yeah.
So you think they just kept going to the same place in Iowa?
Do you think they just kept going to the same place in Omaha?
Yes.
I mean, and I still believe they came to the same place in Iowa.
Okay. And that's fine. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying like it didn't, it's not
I know.
connected.
I feel
haven't been
like
able to
there's
connect-
more evidence connecting them all than there isn't.
There's one person that says that it happened.
No, no.
Who's the other one?
Well, Rusty Nelson just said it in the interview that I sent you that you must not have listened to.
No, I didn't have time. I was at work. What were you doing?
I was researching. Now, anyway, we'll get into this, and we'll let the audience decide and see if they kind of
And I could change my mind by the end of
see
this.
more of my viewpoint or see more of your viewpoint.
Well,
We'll see.
like I said, my mind's open. So as we go along,
Well, good.
that could change.
Well, good. Well, I just wanted to do a little bit of a recap from last week's because I feel like I will speak for myself that I feel like it's tied together.
Okay.
And we left off where, Noreen was in the jail speaking with Paul Benashi, where he confessed to helping with the abduction of Johnny. And she was speaking to him in prison in 1991. Okay. And in that meeting, I don't know if I talked about it last week or not, but she, asked him several personal questions about Johnny to see if he would know, because she herself was skeptical. And I think there had been so much, years have passed. I think she's gotten her hopes up with so many false sightings of him and different things that I think she would get her hopes up and then she would get let down. So I feel like she went in there with, I guess I want to say not rose-colored glasses. Like she went in there kind of being a little bit skeptical. And one thing she did was she slipped in a picture. She had some photographs, and she slipped in a picture of the private investigator that actually came to them, that was helping them try to find Johnny. And his name was Sam Soda. Did you read about him at all?
I haven't.
Okay, Sam Soda was a private investigator, and he was originally hired by the Goshes. He's the one that called Noreen and tipped her off and said, I have information that another abduction is going to happen with another boy, and that happened in 1984, and that was Eugene Martin. Okay, and then Noreen, after getting this tip-off from the private investigator, she had gone to the police, she went to the newspaper, she went to pretty much everybody she could, and nobody listened to her. And then all of a sudden it happened. So she got a little suspicious of this Sam Soda, because all of a sudden Sam seemed to learn a lot of information about some local pedophiles in the area. And he actually then was the one that went to police and had the distributor of that paper, the Des Moines Register, arrested for molesting some boys. And I can't remember what his name was, but it was just suspicious to her that how do you know all these people, and how did you know this newspaper distributor was molesting boys? And so at that point, then she kind of distanced herself from Sam and didn't want any more to do with him, because she was, again, thinking that, okay, maybe there's something fishy going on. So when she slipped that picture of him to Paul Benashi, she asked him if he knew who that was, and he said yes, and he identified him. And he identified him, gave him his name, which is Sam Soda, and that he was actually in on the kidnapping. And he was the one that was taking pictures of Johnny like weeks prior to the kidnapping. His job was as a recruiter for this ring going on. And so he would take pictures of the boys. He would go around, find boys, take pictures of them without them knowing. And then he would send these pictures to the buyers. And then the buyers would pick out which boys they wanted. And then that's who they would go grab. And so Johnny had a look about him. He had something about him that he was wanted. So that's came from Paul Benashi, as he said, yeah, that he was basically the scout for the buyers. That's why, anyway.
How did she find him as a private investigator?
He came to her.
Okay.
He called her up one day and said, hey, I'm a private investigator and I can help you find Johnny. And then basically was extorting her for money.
Okay.
When all along he was part of it. So he was giving her maybe little tidbits of information, but not really fully divulging information because he was part of it. But that was a way to extort money out of her. This Sam Soto previously worked as a cop, and then he was also a military veteran. Just some information about him. And then I also wanted to mention too, I ended off saying that John Gosch, his dad, I mentioned he was getting those phone calls in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. John Gosch was also a military veteran. And Noreen had mentioned that she took Johnny to Offutt Air Force Base for a tour. Do you remember me saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if you ever heard the conspiracy or are aware of the MK Ultra experiments going on in Offutt Air Force Base. But the fact that he went to Offutt, had a tour with his boy couldn't really remember the tour. Suspiciously or supposedly, MK Ultra experiments are going on at Offutt, and then John is getting these mysterious phone calls every week at the same time in the middle of the night. Do you suppose I'm just, out there with my conspiracy that thinking it was some kind of tone or some kind of message or something to almost kind of like Pavlov's dog type thing to pre-program him so when he finally got the phone call the night before he went missing, it said, let Johnny go on his paper out on his own. And he had that conversation, which was odd. And he was like, yeah, okay, click.
I have no idea.
Anyway.
What's the MK Ultra?
Mind control. Basically brainwashing and then doing mind control experiments. Some of those files are, I guess, were declassified back in 2020 when Trump took office the first time, and he declassified some of those. So that'd be interesting to read up on for people. Anyway, it's kind of like a hypnosis type of thing. So if you hear a tone, you kind of go into a hypnotic trance, and then you are more likely to do things that you would normally do. Like your personality changes and you can be controlled, basically is what it is. Okay. And then for that reason, I don't know. I just think there's something weird going on with John. And then also I read somewhere that there was speculation because after Noreen and John divorced, he kind of just disappeared. Like you didn't really hear much of him. There was speculation that came out that there might have been some sexual molestation between John and Johnny. Now, obviously can't prove that because Johnny's not here to say, and John, won't admit any of that, but that was some speculation going on.
Okay.
Anyway.
So now we're going to get into Franklin?
Sure, because I had to mention that Noreen had mentioned that John had meetings with Larry King.
Okay. So the Gosh abduction was in 1982.
Mm-hmm.
But so Lawrence King is kind of the main subject of the Franklin scandal, the Franklin cover-up. And so a little bit about Lawrence King, and we'll probably refer to him as Larry King or
Sure.
whatever from now on, but it's not the same Larry King that you saw on TV. So this Lawrence King was from the Omaha area. He actually went to college at UNO, and I believe he actually graduated in 82. 72. But he actually took over the Federal Credit Union, which was the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union, in 1970. And the credit union itself was like 2 years old. I don't think that it was doing very well. So Larry was brought in to manage and also work as, I think he was like in charge of the finance.
And the Federal Credit Union was primarily in North Omaha, and it was geared towards blacks, basically. And it was for, I don't want to say impoverished, but low-income individuals for a credit union.
It was in that community, yeah. And that's...
and Larry King is indeed himself a big black man.
Yes. So,
just so everybody can get a picture of him.
Yeah. And, they can always look him up too, but it's not the old Larry King.
No.
Just so we make that clear. So how this thing kind of started was, and I believe it was in 1988. Let me look and make sure of my notes here.
Well, I have a timeline.
Do you have a timeline?
You bet I do.
So I believe it was in 88 that, go ahead.
Go ahead with your thought
well, that's
first.
when the investigation began into the credit union itself. And that's when they actually, I think it was in late 88 is when they actually kind of shut the credit union down.
November.
November, yeah. And it was because there was something going on with the books. I don't know exactly what triggered the investigation, but something with the books.
I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
So in 1976, their accountant, his name was Thomas Harvey, he discovered some manipulation on some of the bank accounts.
In 76?
76.
And they didn't do anything till 88? Go ahead.
So he himself, the accountant, starts to manipulate his books to cover up the missing money. The accountant does. Okay. So then it's kind of hidden for a while. And then I have it written down here. It didn't start getting looked into until 1984. One of the bank tellers named Ed Hobbs writes a letter to the board of the Franklin board, I guess, to tell them to get them on alert that there was some suspicious activity going on. So definitely there was some stuff going on beforehand, but nothing really got investigated. It said in 1981 too, an anonymous letter was also sent to the Franklin Credit Union Association about some concerns. So this has gradually been slowly kind of building to where they're kind of looking into him.
We'll be right back.
Not only are many trying to remove us from our constitutionally limited Judeo-Christian ethos republic, more seem to be forgetting our Judeo-Christian Christitutionalist foundations. Not here at Christitutionalist, we talk about all these things: the past, the present, the future. Biblical community, Judeo-Christian ethos, the whole Bible, biblical community, not worldly communism. And there is a big difference. Join us, Christitutionalists.
So in 88 is when it was actually raided. And in the course of their investigation, I think they determined that anywhere from like $34 to $40 million had been embezzled by Larry King. And then, so anyways, a judge froze his assets, and an investigation ensued. And I think part of the investigation, I think, was being done by the legislature as well. They actually created a committee called the Franklin Committee.
Yeah, and so he was doing shady stuff with, like, he was selling people fake CDs.
Yeah.
And I don't know, doing the basically had a Ponzi scheme. Basically, is what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of odd because he didn't make a lot of money at the credit union so far as his salary was concerned. It was a pretty modest salary. Yet he spent money like crazy. He had like an apartment in Washington, D.C., and I think that apartment was $5,000 a month. And plus he drove like a BMW or Mercedes or something like that. He had lavish parties. He had expensive clothes. He traveled a lot. And he became actually fairly well connected in politics. So he became, I believe, the chair for the Black Republican, not party, but something that, I got to note what it was actually called.
King helped revitalize the Nebraska Black Republican Council and became its state chairman in 1982.
Yep. And then he was also involved at the federal level with the Black Republican Council, and I believe he was
He was appointed vice president for finance of the National Black Republican Council, served on the advisory committee for President Ronald Reagan for his second inauguration.
Yeah, he actually sang the national anthem.
Yep.
At the convention.
At the 1984 Republican National Convention.
Yeah. So he became pretty well connected with D.C., people in D.C. He was also fairly well connected in Omaha. He was a part of a lot of organizations. I had a list, and it's like 2 pages long, and it was everything from Boys and Girls Town or Boys and Girls Club. YMCA.
Campfire Girls, Head Start, Salvation Army.
Yeah, he owned a restaurant downtown called the French Cafe. And then he also was said to own a daycare.
That I don't know. I don't know if I've seen that in his.
That I haven't read anywhere.
Yeah.
No, I just haven't seen it. Everything I saw was he'd actually applied to fill some sort of a position in Washington, D.C. And I found a document through the Ronald Reagan Library that they still had on Larry King. And in this application, it listed all of the organizations that he belonged to, and it didn't list any of any of his restaurants or his catering business or whatever the heck he had going on. But
yeah, that's where because that's what his claim was, where he was getting all this money, is that, his restaurant was doing so well.
Yeah.
That's he was getting
And we're
millions of dollars.
Yeah. And $5,000 a month for an apartment in the early 80s. I can't imagine what that would be today.
It's like $11,000 today.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of money.
Double
But
plus
anyways,
some.
if you're on a modest salary from a credit union, I'm sure that probably threw up some flags as well.
Sure.
So anyways, this Franklin committee that was put together in Nebraska, and it was...
A couple known players
With what?
with that on the board was Ernie Chambers.
Ernie Chambers, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a vice chair.
And then Lauren Schmidt, he happened to be one of the more, I want to say, more integrated ones that was really concerned in investigating this.
Yeah, and they actually had, before they hired Gary Caradori as the investigator, there was an investigator before Gary. And I didn't write that person's name down. But Gary took over in 89. It was actually put together.
I probably have it here.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's this big investigation going on about the federal credit union. And the Foster Care Review Board went to went right to the legislature, to that committee, and said, hey, we've had some reports from some of our foster kids.
Yeah, they wrote a letter to the Franklin committee.
Yeah.
And said that there was some concerns. Because go ahead.
Oh, just that there had been some abuse in some of these kids that attended some parties.
Put on by Larry King.
By Larry King.
Yeah, affiliated with Larry King.
So,
and
that's when the investigation kind of split. So there was the one side that was looking into the banking, and then the other side was looking into the sexual assaults or...
Yeah, and when we say parties,
kids.
we don't mean like happy-go-lucky birthday parties. We mean sex parties.
Yeah.
That these children attended to.
And then...
Or attended, I should say.
This is kind of where things get a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Because as the investigation goes on, a lot of names come out, and some of them, some powerful people. So you had Larry King, and we'll start with just Omaha. So Larry King, Robert Wadman, he happened to be the chief of police in Omaha. Peter Citron, and I think Peter, wasn't he part of the paper? Was it the Omaha World Herald?
Yeah, he was an editor of the Omaha World Herald.
Yep, and then Harold Anderson, I think, was also a part of the Omaha World Herald.
He was the CEO of the World Herald.
And then Alan Baer, he was a big business owner and a pretty wealthy person.
He was the mall financier. He owned the malls.
There was a Deward Finch, and Deward was a superintendent of schools in, Fort Calhoun.
Yep.
And then another name that came up was Judge Theodore Carlson. And I'm sure there's probably some names I'm missing, but those were kind of the main ones, at least of the investigation that Gary was conducting. What you looking for there?
Nothing. I'm just looking at all the names here to see kind of if there's anybody else I need to mention. I mean, there's just small players, none that were accused, but you've got that Sam Van Pelt. He was a special prosecutor, but we'll talk about him later because he doesn't come into play till later. But also, we can mention the foster parents. So there was a family by the name of the Webbs. They were accused of child abuse, and then also of not only their own children, but they also had these foster children that they were abusing, and then also putting in for sex trafficking. sexual abuse
Sure.
by this ring.
So then the names on some victims, and there's several of those as well. And they're not, I don't know all of them because there could have been upwards of, I think, 60 to 80 reported victims. I don't have all their names, but the names that I have, there's Jeff Hubble, there's Paul Benaki, Alicia Owens, Troy Bonner. There's a Danny King. I believe it's James Danny King. He goes by Danny. Joel Webb, Chris Parker. God, was there another one that was?
The only one, well, there's
Those are
a
kind
few.
of the main names.
There's a few mentioned. There's a Washington. Her last name's Washington. Elise Washington.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
She was one that was in foster care. The Webb kids, they were the foster parents' kid. Paul Benashi. So the four that are the main characters, I would say, that were actually going to testify against Larry King was Paul Benashi, Troy Bonner, Alicia Owens, and Danny King.
Yeah.
Those were the four.
And I think
Those are the four that were willing to come forward.
Sure. And without throwing this into an immediate confusing mess.
It's, yeah. Good luck.
Well, I think maybe the easiest way would maybe to start off with the interviews that Gary Caradori did. So we can go through maybe what Alicia talked about. And then maybe we can talk about then Paul Bonner, or Paul Benaki, and then Troy Bonner and James King.
Okay. Okay. Or
That might make it simple. Otherwise, I think we're going to be
that
jumping.
or a timeline.
Well, do you have a timeline set
I
out?
got a timeline.
Well, we can start with your timeline if you want.
I lost it. Okay.
What I don't want to do, I just didn't want to go into this giant web right away and start jumping around so much that people just get confused and say, wait, who, what?
Yeah. So I find it easier to go on a timeline. And now we're going to mention some names, and then we can maybe talk about who the characters are in a little while, maybe as we go down this timeline. You want to do that?
You can try that.
Maybe? Okay, so we talked a little bit about the development of the Franklin Credit Union. 1978 is when Paul Benashi comes into the picture. Okay, pretty early. So, and how we can correlate him to the Johnny Gosch, again, is because he was in prison for molesting a child. And while he was in prison, he made a confession that he was in on the kidnapping of Johnny Gosch. Okay, so now at this point, Paul Benashi's in his early 20s, I believe. I think, which was what did I say, 1989?
Are we starting in 78, 4 years before?
Yeah, so okay. I'm doing the backstory. Like, okay, we got Paul in prison, and back in 1978, this is when Paul was introduced into this ring. Okay, that early. So basically, Paul was he's the one that confessed, but he was introduced to this pedophile ring earlier. Okay, so 1978 is when this starts. And so first thing he does is he had attended a sex party at the Twin Tower penthouse in Omaha, where he was introduced to Alan Beer. And that's where they brought Paul Benashi in, and Alan Bear was one of the main attendees there.
So did Larry King bring him in, or who actually brought him in? Do you know?
I don't have that he actually meets Larry King until later.
Okay.
So it's interesting to me because Larry King is not mentioned at the beginning of this.
And I think Alan Bear is maybe That's the guy that when I read the interviews that Paul seemed to be with the most.
Yes, he was with him the most. So whether Paul was out on the streets and picking people up, picking boys up, I don't know. So then after that, this is December of 78, Paul then starts a sexual arrangement with Harold Anderson, who is the CEO of the Omaha World Herald. And then 1979, Paul then is introduced to Peter Citron, who is the editor of the Omaha World Herald. 1980, Paul Bonacci then meets Larry King in Sarpy County, where he says they performed a satanic ritual were involved in satanic ritual abuse.
So these parties, now were the parties the same from the late 70s all the way through the 80s, does he say? Because
No.
like when Alicia describes the parties, and she's another one of the victims, she would often talk about how she would get a ride to the party. I think Jeff Hubble is who gave her a ride to the party. That's who she rode with, I think, most of the time.
I don't know. I know she was introduced by Troy Bonner. Troy is the original one that took her to her very first one, is what she said in her interview.
God, I thought she said Jeff. Maybe it was Bonner. But
Yeah,
anyways,
it was Bonner.
there would be a lot of kids. So it wasn't just like one adult and one kid. We're talking a handful of adults and a lot of kids. And there would be alcohol involved. There would be drugs involved. And, of course, there would be sexual acts involved. And there would be photography and there would be videography.
Yeah.
They would have the kids play games. They would have kids sitting on their laps. There'd be fondling. And it was just a gross party.
So it says here in 1981, Paul then begins to go around town with Alan Bear, and he would assist Alan in entrapping new kids to be used by Bear and others. So that's the whole enticing kids and getting kids starts in 1981.
So it's funny that you say this, because I think it was last week when I was looking at the board that I have sitting up that has the names of the people involved. And I think I pointed out to Alan Bear, and I hadn't even gotten that far. I'm not nearly as far into this as you are.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, on everything that I read, I just my own personal feeling that somehow Alan was the guy. Mm-hmm. And I know that Larry King is the focus of the investigation, but for whatever reason, I just had this feeling as I was reading statements that Alan just seems like he's the money.
He's the money and the power. Because initially Larry King was nobody. Mm-hmm. Larry King didn't have the money and the power. He was a peon.
Yeah, and I don't know when Larry would have started to embezzle. I know that he was probably getting involved with Washington, D.C., probably in the really, really early 80s. I don't know that I really saw much in the 70s. I think 82.
Yeah, according to the timeline, he became the manager, and then back in 76 is when they started noticing some shady things going on. And initially they said it was $400,000 was missing in bank funds. And so then that's when the accountant was trying to adjust his books to cover it up.
Which is far from the 34 to 40 million is what they...
Right, so that's what it ended up at. Yep.
That had been embezzled.
Okay, so now 1982, it says Paul is flown to California to Bohemian Grove to participate in orgies with governmental officials and politicians.
You said that was 82?
1982. And then that's when it says, and he was helped participate in the kidnapping of Johnny Gosch in West Des Moines. It says James Rothstein, a former New York police detective, is a new private investigator working on the case for Johnny Gosch's mother, Noreen. 1983 is where Danny King comes into play. Danny King, another victim, meets Larry King, who are not related, and Alan Bear at a party. 1983, Harold Anderson speaks at the Franklin Credit Union annual meeting, so there's connections there. 1983, later on in August, Troy Bonner now meets Alan Bear through a friend at the Twin Tower Apartments.
Does it say how old these guys are at the time, so far as Troy Bonner and
They're kids.
yeah,
They're kids. They're like 16.
so they're teenagers.
They're
then?
teenagers.
Okay.
They're kids.
And most of the people I think that we see they're involved are probably in their teens. 12 might be the youngest, maybe. But I think a lot of them that we're going to discuss are in their teens.
1984, Danny King takes out of town trips with Alan Bear. Then in 1984, this is when the letter was written to the credit union by Edward Hobbs, a bank teller, saying that there's some shady stuff going on, and we think you need to be investigated here. And at this time, the board said, this is kind of funny, said, well, we can't do anything about it because we don't want to seem like the big bad white guys jumping on a tiny black credit union. So they kind of ignored it.
Now, what year did Alicia Owen? I thought she was in the early 80s.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so then let's see. 1984, July. Troy Bonner meets Larry King at the Max, a bar in downtown, which is known to be a gay bar. And that was kind of one of his soliciting joints, the Max, and then also I said the French Cafe that he owned. He would use those clubs in the cafe to traffic kids or to entice kids. There would be shady stuff going on in the back rooms or the basements of these places.
What year was that?
1984.
See, I
Okay.
think Alicia started in 83. I do know that.
I have 1985.
The first party was held in August of 1983 at the Twin Towers penthouse top floor apartment.
Oh, no.
Yep,
Scratch
Alicia
that.
arrived with Troy Bonner and Jeff Hubble.
Yeah, scratch that. It says 1985. She gave birth to a baby. Sorry.
Okay, yep.
Okay. 1984, Lawrence King throws lavish party in Dallas, Texas after singing the national anthem at the Republican National GOP convention. Then, that same year, in September, he gets an apartment for Troy Bonner at 48th and Dodge, where King would abuse Troy Bonner.
So I'm thinking, so far as the kids go, it seems that Troy Bonner and maybe even Jeff Hubble were probably the two. I don't know if they were the oldest teens, but they were probably involved longer than a lot of the others, and maybe Danny King as well.
Yeah. Well, I would say maybe even those four, Alicia, these four that were probably...
Sure.
September of 84, Larry King takes Lisa Webb, who is the foster parent, takes Lisa Webb and 15 to 20 boys from Boys Town to Chicago for a sex party.
Now, I think Elisa, you said Lisa Webb, that's the
Foster mom.
the foster mom. Mm-hmm. I think she's related to Larry.
I think so.
I think they're cousins.
Well,
I believe they're cousins.
he also has a cousin that's in the school system too.
He does or she does?
He does.
Okay. Because I think when I was reading I think it was a Franklin cover-up towards the beginning.
Or was it the Washington that's the cousin? I can't remember.
I believe it was the Webb, because
Okay.
the Webb is the first families that they kind of talk about in that book.
1985, a party is thrown at the Brandeis Building in Omaha, where both Troy Bonner and Larry King are in attendance. Alicia Owens gives birth to a baby in 85, who then is claimed that the father of her baby is Robert Wadman, who is the police chief of Omaha. So he's involved. Okay, where do we want to start?
Man.
Oh, I should say, okay, the last thing I have in 1985 is Jarrett and Barbara Webb, home of the foster children, related to Larry King. Here you go. Their children actually start complaining of physical and sexual abuse by them.
And I wonder if that's, I'll have to look.
So those foster kids, I believe, were the ones that were complaining to the social worker for the foster care system.
Okay.
And then I think her name, Julie Walters. And then she's the one who, Julie Walters was a welfare officer who worked for Boys Town at the time. She had been called because of constant reference by Webb's children and others to that institution that they had been involved in child sex, homosexual, and pornography industry run by Larry King. The children state that they were regularly taken to Washington by plane with other youth to attend parties hosted by King involving many prominent people, including businessmen, politicians.
So I think it's, I'm trying to think of how to describe this best. So it is like it's a trafficking ring in Omaha, but it doesn't just stay in Omaha. This is something that, I don't know if you want to call it a traveling circus, but it travels all over. So they make trips out to California and they hook up with people out there. They attend parties and get involved with probably another ring, I would guess, in Washington, D.C. And later on, we can probably get into that too, and that's going to involve Craig Spence and Henry Vinson. Actually, Henry Vinson, I don't know that he really got involved. I think he's more of kind of a witness. But and then even some trips to the White House. And what actually happened in the White House, I'm not real sure. I just hear mostly tours. But
yeah, supposedly there's these tunnels under the White House that they would take these boys in as a reward, and they get to tour the White House, and they would take them in at midnight, and they would just tour the back halls of the White House. They wouldn't be going like to the Oval Office or anything like that. It was just like a secret passageway to the White House that they were getting in. They were getting these tours, and I don't think anybody knew about it except for Craig Spence, who had access.
And Marissa, what were we at for time?
53 minutes.
Okay. Do we want to maybe keep these at right about an hour each? Because there's going to be several.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that if we drag them on too long, people kind of get tired.
Well,
also, they listen when they travel.
And it's such a confusing and convoluted thing. It's hard. It's easy to get confused. Sure. It's hard to understand. And so I think if we get in too big of chunks, then people are going to lose. They're going to lose it.
And it might be even best as we go forward, because I think people have the gist of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
And the number of people we're going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my thought is maybe we can start with each, at least, of the victims that we know of that actually tell a story. Maybe we can discuss their story. So, like, we can, for example, talk about Alicia's story, and then we can talk about Paul Benacchi's story, and we can talk about Troy Bonner's story. They're all going to be similar. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be from their point of view. And I think something that's probably pretty important for people to understand and this is from a law enforcement experience. A lot of what we're going to talk about at some point is going to be Alicia's court case where she's found guilty of perjury. And one of the reasons is they're going to bring up that her story didn't maybe 100% match another person's story. Now, when you're conducting a law enforcement investigation, and it doesn't matter if it's 2 witnesses, 3 witnesses, 4, very rarely are you going to have 2 people say the same thing. And as an example, if all 3 of us are sitting here in this studio, and if someone were to come through that front door and run through and grab something and then run out, when we prepared statements for law enforcement, I can guarantee you that there will be details in your statement and in my statement and in Marissa's statement that don't match.
Yeah.
That does not mean that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It just means that sometimes we remember things a little bit different. And it could be something stupid like if the person was wearing a hat, the color of his hat, or, if he ran in one door and out another, we might not exactly remember which door did he come in,
or
which
probably
did he go
even
out.
the time frame.
So,
he stayed for 30 seconds. No, he was there over a minute.
So there's going to be details like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times that don't match up with your witnesses or with your victims. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's not that that I'm not a credible person or you're not a credible person. Marissa is questionable always. But
she's the sane one out of all 3 of us. But
anyway. It doesn't take away from the fact that the event actually occurred.
Right. And with these particular victims, we have to remember that they were most likely drugged.
And there was alcohol involved.
And also had gone through some horrific events.
Sure.
Some trauma. And so I think trauma in itself will do a lot of things to your mind and your memory.
And you'll also notice for anybody that watches a court case on TV that they will really, really hammer, especially a defense attorney, on the witnesses. And they know that these witnesses are probably going to have some differences in their story, and they are really, really going to focus on those differences. And they're going to make sure that if there's a jury, that they hear about all of these differences a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole point of it is to make it sound like witnesses are not credible, or that a victim might not be credible. So that's kind of the game that goes on in court. It's legal. It happens in every court case, but I think it's important for a listener to understand that you can watch any case and that's what you'll see. I guarantee it. So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Well, before we wrap up today's episode, I think maybe just to reiterate how Larry King, he just kind of integrated himself with a lot of entities that involved kids. Because we talked about, Marissa, you mentioned he was affiliated with Head Start.
Mm-hmm.
And I had read that he owned a daycare. And then he integrated himself into Boys Town, into the Boys and Girls Club.
YMCA?
He made himself pretty much available to any children's or any kids group that there was. And that is how that's how he would get his kids, basically, to be trafficked. And I know it's shocking to hear that Boys Town is involved, but there was a dirty player that was sent to Boys Town. His name was Father Kelly. Father Kelly was actually caught molesting children in upstate New York, and they wanted to just wash their hands of him. So they sent him to Omaha, and he ended up in Boys Town, and he was one of the main teachers at Boys Town, and he actually was the one that was signing off, what do you call it, when their passes. He would actually sign them off on their passes so that they could be out on these trips for hours and hours at a time, and out-of-town trips. Is that something that, I'm not really familiar with the day passes or what the rules and regulations are at Boys Town, but I assume that they all have to be accounted for and they just don't have free reign.
At Boys Town?
Yeah.
The only thing that I can attest to is the Boys Town in Grand Island, because I was there. That's just a 2-week stint. I'm assuming it's probably a lot different at the Boys Town in Omaha.
I know it's big. I know that's considered its own city. They have their own...
Yeah, it's its own community.
But I think there's some regulations if you're a student there that you have to have check-ins. And
oh, absolutely.
What I had read is that Father Kelly kind of knew what was going on, and he was the one that was approving their passes to be gone.
Yeah,
at wee hours, all night long.
There was a lot of kids that were attending Boys Town that were hired by Larry King to do his yard work and things like that. So,
yeah, it mentioned that. And to do odd jobs at the credit union.
Yeah,
weird things. And Larry King would have he had a bunch of accounts for Boys Town at the credit union.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a web.
It's a web.
So a pedophile web.
Yeah.
That we'll be discussing anyway.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to add before we close?
No, I think that's
okay.
all. I kind of went down that timeline with it. I don't know. That just helps me a little bit. Now I know we don't know all the characters yet, but
sure,
we'll get into it.
And all right. Well,
all right.
I guess next time we'll start talking about. We'll just pick out a victim and we'll tell their story.
To be continued.
All right. Well, we'll catch you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Don't talk back unless you want to